You have a pet chicken on your lap?
Yeah.
Just almost fell out of my chair. Like, what? She would see her deceased dog. She had a great aunt that passed away from the Eastland disaster in 1915 on Lake Michigan. The deceased were laid out in a warehouse. It could be a traumatic passing. That's him. That's
Yeah.
how he was. Victims of violence deserve to have their voice heard as well. I don't know what's going to come out of the next reading.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Medium's Table. I'm your host, Michelle Gardner. This podcast is your personal invitation to join me at the intersection of the everyday and the extraordinary. Together, we'll explore the magic of mediumship, share spiritual stories, and connect with fellow mediums on this incredible journey. So grab a seat, pour yourself a cuppa, and come join us at the Medium's Table, where spirits gather and stories unfold. I'd like to welcome back to the show again today, longtime friend and wonderful medium, Kim Liddell. Welcome back, Kim.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be back.
You've shared some really great stories and insights with us in previous episodes. And I'm really curious to know, what have you got for us today?
I think it would be great to share my experiences as a healer and medium. Like how I perceive information and how I transmit that, or share that and relay it to the sitter.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I love hearing about this sort of how mediums get their information. It's so fascinating, and each story is so unique.
So I'm going to share some excerpts and tidbits from different readings and how I experienced it. So for example, this one lady I did a reading for, and so I saw my own German Shepherd, with my third eye. So I mentioned that to her. So of course she had a German Shepherd that was on the other side, and I relayed. I said, "You must be the dog has shown me that you feel and sent the dog." And she said, "Yes, I see the dog actually." So she would see her deceased dog from time to time. So I relayed that to her, and that gave her comfort and then validation as well that she is seeing her dog, here and there, right? And that gives her comfort and peace and love. And then with her, I said, "Well, I'm on the dock. I can see water. I can see a boat coming." And I'm like, "Wait a minute. No, it's a ship. And it's big enough to hold, it's a cruise ship. It's big enough to hold thousands of people." And then I was able to see and describe, a couple of ladies. It turned out that she had a great aunt that passed away from the Eastland disaster, in 1915, on Lake Michigan.
Wow.
Actually, it was on the river next to Lake Michigan. Yeah, it was a big deal. Thousands of people, died. So it was amazing that I was able to bring that through for her. Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
incredible. So what happened with the ship? Did it sink, or did it crash, or?
It capsized. The ships have a balancing system. I forgot what it's called. It's supposed to keep it buoyant but balanced. Well, it went unbalanced. So it
Wow.
capsized. Yeah. So, and it was a big deal. There was a big business in Chicago at that time.
Yeah.
They handed out tickets to all of their employees to bring friends and family. It was supposed to be a fun company picnic gathering on the ship. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it turned out to be a tragic thing. And what's interesting is reading about when I read about it, and there's actually a documentary. The deceased were laid out in a warehouse,
Mm.
on Lake Street. And that warehouse was actually eventually converted into the Harpo Studios for Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. And she actually reported there were, sightings and, haunting, appearances, right? Spiritual sightings in the building. But that
Yeah.
building has been taken down and now the new McDonald's headquarters in Chicago.
All right. Okay. Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah.
a bit of history there for you,
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
now. Hmm.
Yeah. And that's incredible. So
Hmm.
what other information have you brought through in readings, that may have been in unusual ways or how it's come through?
It's been a wonderful journey, and I have to say, some of it comes through animation, like Jane and Judy from the Jetsons showing me mother and
Mm.
daughter.
Ah,
Or
yeah.
yeah, yeah, or I see, Wilma and Betty from the Flintstones,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
showing,
that would signify best friends. Is that what it would
yeah,
be?
usually it
Yep.
does. Yep. Yep. Or sometimes I see Barney, Barney, the next
Yep.
door neighbor, the best friend from next door,
Yeah.
symbolically, that's what it's bringing through. I've seen, actors from Cheers, actors from Dallas, like in the one situation that I saw, um, I forgot the gentleman's name, but the actor that played the psychologist on Cheers, I seen him, and then I seen Patrick Duffy from Dallas. But they
Mm.
both, what the message was, they both had sisters that were, well, relatives that were a victim of violence, and that were murdered,
Ah,
right? So
yeah.
that was symbolic, bringing through, a traumatic experience that the deceased spirit had, you
Mm.
know before passing.
Yeah. Wow.
Mhm.
And what do they call that when a spirit uses, because this is a unique thing to each medium, isn't it? And this is unique to you.
Well, when I see those pictures, I'm seeing it with the third eye, and then my intuition is, it's a learning process trying to understand, when I understood symbolically what it meant, then I knew, so it was
Mm.
like part of that psyche, trying to interpret. But then as long as I'm relaying it correctly,
Mm.
to the sitter, then the sitter can say, yes, I understand, no, I don't, or can you
Mm.
clarify? And and then if the sitter give me minimal feedback, I can keep moving forward with that, right? If
Mm.
they say
Mm.
no, then either I'm misinterpreting, or they're not getting it, but then usually spirit will show it to me again, and then maybe I'll see it more correctly and then interpret correctly.
Mm.
Right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So spirit's
Mhm.
actually using your reference library on the
Ah, there you
knowledge,
go. Yes. Thank you.
yeah, that you have, because obviously you're familiar with these shows or these characters. So
Of
spirits,
course.
yeah, that's incredible, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I see Charlie Brown, I see Lucy, I've seen Sally.
Mm.
Um, it's just amazing. I'm even TV shows like Bewitched.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Yep.
I've seen Uncle Arthur from the show Bewitched, and I'm like, your uncle, is here.
Yeah. Yeah. And does that also apply to songs or music? Does that have any reference in readings?
Sometimes, yes, yes. I actually am clairaudient. So sometimes, every day I'm actually hearing a song playing in my head. It could be
Mm.
Piano Man from Billy Joel, or it could be, you know,
Mm.
uh, a song from the Beatles or something, right? Um,
Yeah.
but yes, sometimes I do get songs as well. Yeah,
Mm. Now,
definitely.
I think you did a reading for my husband. Do you want to talk about who came through, like what reference spirit used for that? Do you
Oh
remember that?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was really Yeah, I started out with, if I remember correctly, I started out describing the tall gentleman that is in a wheelchair, and his
Mm-hmm.
hands were kind of large or the knuckles were kind of big. And then that there would, so the image and the feeling I would get was Florence Nightingale, like this woman with a caregiver for him, for a
Mm.
while. And yeah, and then the next thing I know, I go from Florence Nightingale to Florence Henderson. I'm like, okay, I see Florence Henderson. Of course, the person is saying, um, is that Carol Brady from the Brady Bunch? I'm like, yeah, so I was really, it's really lovely to hear the validation that this woman looked exactly, this mother that's coming through
Mm.
actually looked like Carol Brady, the
Yeah.
character, Florence Henderson. So it was so enlightening for me as a medium, but as well for the sitter.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so nice to have that. And it's such a lovely, pleasant experience to have that. So.
Yeah. And I do remember, and you were right, because even with the Florence Nightingale, she did care for him. I am familiar with the spirit that was coming through for my husband, and she did look like, I'm like, and I didn't realize until you said that. I'm like, she does look like Carol Brady from the Brady Bunch. I was like, wow. I never put two and two together until you said that. I'm like, that is absolutely right. I can't believe I didn't pick that up. So that's incredible that spirit brought her through in that way, because it's all correct and true, 100%. So
Thank you.
that
Thank you for validation.
mm. And it's amazing, how they use that and your reference library to portray characters, songs, messages, or what that actor may have experienced. Like you were saying, what did you say? They had sisters that had succumbed to, traumatic events.
Well,
The
definitely.
mm, mm. So that's it. That's really interesting how spirit does that. And when this started happening, did you have to learn what this all meant, or did you just automatically go, hang on a minute, I understand they're talking about the character of a person?
That took a little while.
Mm,
Okay. So, like, for example, seeing Jane and Judy Jetson, I thought it was the name, but then
mm,
I kept getting it and getting it. And then one day I'm like, it's the mother. you know,
yeah,
if I see Jane, it's the mother. If I see Judy, it's the daughter relationship
yeah,
symbolically. So there is a learning curve. And that's why it's so important for us mediums to sit in development circle and to do practice readings,
mm,
to build up the understanding, the reference. We have that reference library. It's making the connection, the
yeah,
synapses,
yeah,
linking. So it was like, oh my gosh, I got it now. So now when I see Jane, I know it's mom.
yeah. That's
you know,
incredible. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. When I see Indora, the grandmother from Bewitched, I know it's grandmother.
yeah, yeah. I love that because it's so it's almost like so comical that they're bringing you through cartoons and beloved shows from when you were a child, and you know what I mean, that you just I just love that. It sounds like it makes mediumship so much fun for you. So much fun.
It is. In the beginning, I was pretty tense and, I was so worried about being wrong.
Mm,
And there were sometimes I was wrong, but I was so green with that. Yes, I was into holistic energy work and I got comfortable with that, but that was a learning curve as well.
mm,
But I'm just so grateful that I actually took steps over the years to implement training, because there
mm.
is a learning curve to it. And it's just, I'm still learning. I'm
Yeah,
still learning. I don't know what's going to come out of the next reading,
yeah, yeah.
right?
And that's the joy of it. That's almost like, I don't want to say the thrill of it, but it's like the anticipation of what's going to be next, what's going to happen.
Yes, and I'm at that point now where I can enjoy them. It's building the confidence and having faith. It's just like I said in a previous, recording. If I can trust my guide dog, Rebecca, totally, crossing streets and taking me around obstacles and up and down steps. I need to trust the process with mediumship. I gotta trust it. It's total trust. I have to shed any doubts and fears.
Yeah.
To be the best that I can be to help you and others. And then it is getting more and more joyful, because I'm concentrating now on feel, 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 right? And it's so important to feel the feelings that goes along with it. And it is working. It is helpful.
That poses a question that I'm going to ask, because I'm sure if anyone, I sort of to some degree I analyze what's being said, and I'm like, hang on a minute, that could sound like. So when you say that, and we spoke about spirit using your reference library from your past experiences watching TV shows, that sounds like spirit can hear what you think. They know what you've seen. They can get right inside your head and know everything. What do you say about that?
I believe it. The more I do this, yes, and I think of it like the matrix system, like I studied the David Morehouse, I took that course, and it's just so fascinating. His concept was like the matrix. You can think ahead, you can think in the past, you can think over there, or, or below us or above us. So, so yeah, there's such a huge network of interconnection. It's there. And I really like the concept that Edgar Casey had put forth in one of his readings, the famous sleeping prophet. There's many books about him. His concept of us being connected is, think of a star and think of the core in the middle. And if you think of yourself as one point on one side of the star, and I'm somewhere else as another point or tip, all we need to do is go inward and we're connected.
Yeah.
The connection is there spiritually, spirit to spirit, living and dead,
So it's true. Spirit can read our mind. They can hear our thoughts. They do know what we're thinking.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, they can see our past. They know where you've been and what you've done.
Definitely. So but they're in the light of love and unconditional love.
Yeah, and they're accessing it for good reasons, not for manipulation. Just to clarify.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah, because it's all about getting the message through to the sitter. And the sitter, for those that don't know, is the client or the person receiving the reading. It's about getting the message and the information to the sitter in the easiest, most efficient way possible, isn't it, really, is what it comes down to.
Definitely. And I just like to share, like, for example, I heard the name Dan from a different reading, and so I brought through a spirit named Dan for this sitter, and she confirmed that, and I moved forward with different messages. I described him, in a wooded area with all these tall trees around him. And I talked about a cliff and, and this and that, and in the gardening, and his thing. And then a little later on, all of a sudden, I felt his joy. So when I opened up more to feel his joy, that's when I realized he truly was, in his lifetime, he truly loved God. in
Mm.
his religion. And he had a love for God. And I actually felt that. And it was so amazing. And then when I
Mm.
relayed that to her, to the sitter, she's like, that's him. That's
Yeah.
how he was. He loved nature, he loved hiking, he loved this, he loved that, but he really had the love for God,
Mm.
and what God had to offer. And so that was, yes, it was validating to hear the name and to have it confirmed that was his name, but it was more validating to confirm his feeling, the love that he had. I was
Yeah.
I was blown away by the joy,
Mm.
that he had. He was truly, a follower of God.
Mm. Yeah. And that's always amazing when they can impart feeling onto you. Or, can you talk about, have you ever experienced when someone may have had an illness or what they may have passed from, where you may feel something inside of you? Does that happen?
Yes, and I find I tend to get uncomfortable in those kind of settings.
Mm.
And but it's up to me as a medium, though. I need to stay grounded and be comfortable with that. I
Mm.
that's so it's so important not to react to something that it could be a traumatic passing,
Mm.
or just something uncomfortable, whatever it is that relays being uncomfortable to me. So that's me reacting. So then, yeah, so sometimes I do feel like I remember feeling something in my right shoulder blade, and my shoulder blade actually rotated on its own like that. And I was like really surprised. So I brought it through. I said, there was something with the right shoulder blade. And the
Mm.
person's like, yes, he had a problem with the right side, blah, blah, blah,
Mm.
from a stroke. And then the shoulder blade and the right side didn't work right, or I have a headache, that shows, yeah, person had a lot of headaches, you
Mm.
know. I felt, something like a missing limb, things like
Mm.
that. So,
Mm.
so that's the empath part,
Yeah.
feeling it through feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you say, just like feeling a missing limb, like it's nothing. And that's just like, for some people, like, wow, you felt like there was a missing limb. That's incredible. So it's amazing how spirit can bring through what they want to portray, again, just to get the message to the sitter, just to get the message to their loved one who's still here in the human world. It's really
Oh
incredible,
yeah,
isn't it? Mm. Mm. So
definitely,
I
definitely. And
I
I
guess
think
go on, sorry.
I think it's important that for me to understand if I feel a twinge in my lower back where the kidney is like, is that me or is that the spirit? So
Mm.
that's what I have to distinguish.
So I guess that then opens up the question for those that are listening. Is this forced upon you? And do you have, like, can you stop this from happening? If they're, bringing you something that you don't want to see, for instance, or you don't want to feel, or you don't want to know, do you have a choice to stop that? Or is it forced upon you? Like a possession almost. You know what I mean?
Um, okay, in the example that I brought, okay, I'll share this. I don't think it was forced on me. It was shown to me indirectly. So for example, a spirit that was passed over from a traumatic rape and strangulation, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't literally shown to me that way, but it was shown to me where I saw Kelsey Grammer, the actor from Cheers. I
Mm-hmm.
saw Patrick Duffy from Della. And then I made, so when and I saw that earlier in the morning before the reading even started. And that's when I realized, so I looked it up quickly. Yes, I did a little homework.
Mm.
I knew they both had victims of violence that was I knew that was the connection, seeing those two symbolic images. So I looked it up and I realized that Kelsey's sister had died, from the victim of violence and crime. And then Patrick's parents were murdered as well. So getting both.
Yeah.
So then going forward into the reading, and then in the reading, sitting in the power, I was holding the space and then feeling the uncomfortable feeling. So in a way, I don't think it was forced upon me because I was preparing for the circle. So it was meant to be.
Yeah.
But I'm just thankful that they showed it to me in an indirect way instead of actually seeing it like watching it on a movie.
Yeah.
So they were sheltering me, but yet giving me the information. And I knew the person died, but I didn't know. I knew the person was raped, but I didn't know how the person died, but it was enough to bring through what I knew.
Yeah.
And I guess, and then after I relayed that, then it was a bit of an experience for me. Actually, it was a pretty big experience, but it was a learning experience as a medium, bringing through like the first victim, in that traumatic sense of passing.
Because unfortunately, there are spirits on the other side that have succumbed to, violence, and which is how they've passed. Doesn't make them evil or bad. It just unfortunate circumstances, and they were someone's loved one. But this is, and again, so obviously those feelings after the reading would have dissipated over time.
Actually, that was a profound for me. It carried with me all day and into the next. By the end of the day, it diminished. But as a medium, I don't think it impacts me as much now because that was like my first victim of crime, traumatic situation. But now I've been doing this for a while, so I'm getting more and more comfortable with it. The key thing is for me to be able to let it go. Again, surround, ground, and shield. Thank the spirit. And of course, ask them, to stay out of your space, right? Afterward.
Yeah.
But I want to say I do agree that spirits that are victims of violence deserve to have their voice heard as well. I mean, they want to come through and say, I'm fine. Stop worrying about me in that space and time as a victim. It's over.
That's so true and so important as well. That's so important. And it is hard when you get your first, like you say, victim of crime. It's a bit of a shock because it's not what you expect. And sometimes it's not how you expect it to come through. But like you said, over time you learn, and it's part of learning, isn't it? It's part of learning as a medium. You experience all sorts of things, and every reading is another experience. And they're all readings are usually so unique, which makes up the colorful, threads that we, carry with us when we do our work. It makes us who we are and helps us to relay the message and communicate. So it's really, important to, like you say, sit in circles, learn, practice, because this is basically a forever thing, really, isn't it, Kim?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I just want to clarify, just because I saw the image of Kelsey Grammer, and Patrick Duffy, whom I adore as actors, just to clarify, they were just symbolic messages to me that was not totally related to them in relation. It was more symbolic of bringing through a woman, a victim for somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That was a good reference library and a gentle way of bringing it through, more so like you were saying than seeing it.
Definitely. Definitely.
Amazing. So it's not, so when a spirit comes through, just to clarify for listeners, it's not possession. It's not.
Oh, no, definitely not. Definitely not. It's just that, yeah, you got to work on the belief system with Hollywood effects, from the horror
Yeah.
movies,
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Exactly. Because I've had someone say to me, aren't you ever worried about being possessed? And then what happens if you can't, you can't get that spirit out of your body? What do you, what do you do? And I just laughed. It's just like, it's like you say,
Well,
it's all Hollywood, but what do you say to that?
well, I actually had a fear of that. I was fearful, and that's growing up with religion, and Hollywood effects, right?
Mm.
And, but I realized the more I meditated and connected, as time went on in practicing, I always said, okay, I'm meditating. I want to connect with my guides, and nobody else. So I was always doing strong affirmation, that I reject anything negative. And, now I know, I feel strong. I feel empowered. I am empowered. I can and do set boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm fine. I'm fine.
That's it. Exactly. And I just want to clarify, I wouldn't laugh at someone who was new to this and ask that question. I know these people, I've known these people for 20 years. So, and they know me well. And when they said it, they're like sort of half joking, but sort of half serious, like, aren't you worried about that? And I'm like, no. And I think that what it comes down to, people need to understand when we do this work, we're doing it on a vibration or a frequency, you might say, that's pure love and light, isn't it? It's a higher vibration that we work with and that we work on when we do this work. Would you agree?
Definitely. I do agree with that. You set your intentions, and you set your intentions high. You have no tolerance for anything, any low or, negative energy. It's all good. It's all done in the light of love. And, that's the only way to go.
I actually want to ask you something. And this is something that you told me recently. Tell me a little bit about how spirit bring through random words, but then you have to go away and, you might go away and look up, they have another meaning, like the word biddy.
What's the word?
Biddy?
Oh. About a year and a half ago, I did a reading for this lady on the West Coast. And of course, I'm blind. I don't see her, on the Zooms. It might have been just a phone call. But anyway, I did a session over the phone or the internet. And so it turned out I heard biddy. And it's just a mental word, biddy. And I heard it again, biddy. And I'm like, I don't want to offend her. To me, biddy means old woman, old nosy woman, And I'm like, do I even say it? It was right at the beginning. And and also the name, I think the name Lucy came up too. So anyway, so I said, do you understand the word biddy? No, And then later on, I said, I see Lucy. And she's like, oh, my chicken's name is Lucy. And she's right here sitting on my lap. And I could just almost fell out of my chair. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a pet chicken on your lap?
Yeah.
And, so the anyway, after the reading was over, something kept nagging at me. Something was nagging at me. It was like about the reading. So I finally looked up the meaning of biddy, the definition meaning. And I was so shocked. So biddy, one of the meanings is biddy is a young chicken or hen. And I was like, talk about being stunned, like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So I sent it to her through Messenger. By the way, did you know that Biddy mean this, And so
Yeah.
she responded like LOL, with hearts and stuff. So it was really cool. So she didn't understand because she didn't know, but I heard it and I almost didn't
Mm.
say it because I was afraid I was going to offend her for the wrong definition of Biddy,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
And that's just bizarre how a word that you don't even know, but spirit knows what it means.
Oh
You know,
yeah. So the
yeah.
spirit was telling me chicken, chicken.
Mm. Mm.
And then I get Lucy. Oh yeah, that's Lucy, my chicken.
That's incredible. Yeah. And I
You
love
know,
how they make you do the work and go and look it up. You go and look it up. We'll give you the word, but you go and do the homework. Find out what it means.
and
Yeah.
you know what? My guide was working on me. It was nagging at me to research it. When I get that nudging, like a
Yeah.
nudging, nagging, persistent feeling or
Yeah.
thinking, I do it. It's like, when I get that, if I ignore it, I'm going to regret it later.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's it. And that's a great confirmation too, to look it up and find out that actually means chicken and she had one in the lap.
Yep.
That's
Well, I learned a new word.
mm, exactly.
Yeah, that
Exactly.
was funny. That was funny.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Kim. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I'm sure the listeners have learned a lot from your stories and your experiences once again. They're always full of so much information. Where can people find you?
You can find me at my website, askmediumkim.com.
Mm-hmm.
I am on Facebook and Instagram, and I have a YouTube channel.
Fantastic. And anyone can book readings with you through either of those platforms. They can reach out to you.
Yes, they can.
Fantastic. Thank you again for being on the show, and we look forward to having you back again very soon. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for joining me at the Medium's Table. The universe is always speaking. Listen and let your spirit soar. Curious for more? Click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe.